Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from 670 The Score, the Mongo and Haugh Show. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune covers the Bears at Haugh. We are joining you during holiday week, the last game of 2023, bringing in 2024 Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons. Could be the last game for Justin Fields at Soldier Field in a Bears jersey. We'll talk about that later, Dan. Interesting week at Haugh, given the momentum, given the vibes that, a lot of people looking at this Bears team as one that's made some progress this year. And certainly there have been some other things going on with some awards given out from the media. But how would you describe the week that was at Haugh?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a relaxed vibe up there. In a good way. I think there's a confidence that this team has pushed itself in the right direction. They obviously would love to finish the year on a strong note if they were able to win these last two games, which are very winnable against the Falcons, and then in Week 18 at Lambeau Field against the Green Bay Packers. You put a pretty good finishing stamp on a year that started off amid much turbulence. And so I think that feeling is inside the building, that while the playoffs are a pipe dream at this point, and it's less than a 0.9% chance at this point that everything would break in the way the Bears would need it to play beyond Week 18, there is a sense that, hey, we still got a chance to carry forward momentum that will be meaningful into 2024, and we'll see which way they take it.
And on Thursday of this week, you were there when the Bears Media Corps awarded the Jeff Dickerson Good Guy Award. It goes annually to a Bears player. I'll let you describe, number one, what qualifies a Bears player for such an award, and number two, why it was named the Jeff Dickerson Good Guy Award after our dear friend who passed away. It's hard to believe, Dan, but it's been 2 years since JD passed away in 2021.
Yeah, to the latter end. I mean, just truly awful to still fathom what happened to Jeff after he also lost his wife to a battle with cancer. And December 28th is the anniversary of Jeff's passing. And so for the last 2 years, since we renamed the Good Guy Award, the Jeff Dickerson Good Guy Award, we've been handing that award out on the anniversary of Jeff's death with his parents in attendance. So it added to the emotion, David, Thursday at Haugh when we awarded this year's winner, Eddie Jackson. Now I'm trying to dig through to find my list so I can give you the list of previous winners, just so you have a snapshot of the guys that have been on this list. And essentially, this is the Chicago chapter of the Pro Football Writers Association coming together annually to single out and honor. It doesn't have to be a player. It can be a coach. It can be someone within the organization that has been professional, courteous, interested in helping the media in a way that is productive. And so we've had a good list. So 2013 is when I started on the beat. Here are the winners since I've been on the beat: Josh McCown, Matt Slauson, Ryan Mundy, Tracy Porter, Zach Miller, Prince Amukamara, Allen Robinson, Mitch Trubisky. Joint winners in 2021, Robert Quinn and Tayshaun Gibson, and last year, Cole Kmet. They are joined now, David, by Eddie Jackson, who is at the end of his 7th season here in Chicago. And, I got to know Eddie really well his rookie year after that game against the Panthers at Soldier Field, where he had the 2 long defensive touchdowns, if you recall that. That was a game that John Fox took great pride in, because I don't think the Bears completed more than 6 passes in that game, and they won going away because their defense scored twice. And Eddie has consistently, in my mind, been not only willing but engaged when you talk to him. Very easy to ask difficult questions too about the state of the team. Also very easy to have small talk with when you're in the middle of a 10-loss season and you're in an open locker room where the vibes aren't great, and you're just kind of looking to do that a little bit, to build relationships. And so the finalists this year, David, were Jalen Johnson, Eddie Jackson, and Cole Kmet. Any 3 of those guys could have won, and I would have given thumbs up. It would have been terrific, And then there were a handful of other players, including Jaquan Brisker, including Tevin Jenkins, including DJ Moore, who you know very well, that also received multiple nominations. And so for me, before we get into the Eddie stuff, I think it's significant that this locker room has had such a good core and a good group of guys that really are solid, and you understand why the coaches in the front office are excited.
Well, that was my initial response to all the different candidates that you could have, and you just could justify a lot of guys, a handful of guys, and we both have been around teams where that just wasn't the case for whatever reason, the relationship between the media and a team that's struggling during a difficult year, during a difficult stretch, can be combative, can be contentious, and it doesn't always have to be. I think what the Bears have done a nice job of, and this is a credit to Ryan Poles and the culture that Matt Eberflus speaks of very glowingly. They have gotten guys in that locker room that have pretty good football character, and they can deal with adversity. They also are very professional for the most part, and
Yeah.
DJ Moore is a consummate pro. I told that about his weekly punctuality, which is impressive in
Right.
its own. Eddie Jackson is somebody who's been there a long time, and if he hasn't been rewarded for anything except for maybe just that longevity and his ability to persevere through what's can be a pretty difficult market if you aren't playing well, and he's not been on a lot of winning teams, then good for Eddie Jackson. He has been somebody that has returned this year, stayed healthy, and been part of a defense that is the best part about this Bears season.
I think I shared this story last year when we were talking a lot about Jalen Johnson and his kind of engagement with the media, and there was like I can't remember what the crux of the story was a year ago, where we were trying to kind of work through. It wasn't even conflict, but there was some things that Jalen was saying that were being misinterpreted, and I tried to come on and say, look, like this is just a guy speaking from the heart, and if you're there every day, you know what he's saying. And I told a story from 2019 after the Bears lost in Philadelphia, and it was one of those losses that was just a gut punch during a season that had such grand hopes and was going downhill. And I remember going to Eddie's locker that day in the visiting locker room in Philly, and him being in a really ornery mood and kind of snapping at me, and me kind of snapping back and being like, man, look, like this is post game. This is part of the job. And him kind of snapping back at me and being like, look, I have given you a lot over my first 3 seasons in the league. Give me this one, and I remember working through that in the tension of the moment and thinking, yeah, you have earned this one. You have, and that's the benefit of being around a team for a long time, is you can have those back and forths as a reporter. You can have those relationships as a player where it can get tense and angry and contentious at times. But if there's a mutual respect back and forth, it all works itself out, and so I've always appreciated about Eddie, because it really was the only time in my time dealing with him that he was ever like that. And so when you build up that equity, when you build up that, credibility and willingness to talk, you have set yourself up to be someone that is looked upon fondly by the people that cover you.
And before we get to what he had to say in accepting this award, I think you're right. And I think with this also, I'll just add this, the growth that he has experienced in Chicago. He's had adversity with injuries. Yeah. He's had setbacks with his play on the field. He's not always a guy you look at and say, well, you know what, that's the way you do it. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. But I also think this, when you talk about this specific role in a professional athlete's job, you're not always going to feel like a willing participant in the conversation, as you just point out in that example. Eddie Jackson's come a long way in that regard. I think it was 2019, might have been 18, but he was a regular on the Mully and Haugh show. He was a regular 8 o'clock staple for us Mondays after Bears games. And I'll just say that as much as I talk about DJ Moore's punctuality, we weren't necessarily talking about Eddie Jackson's punctuality or professionalism that year. I mean, I don't think I need to say any more, but he has come a long way. And it's great to see, because your relationship with him, other people's relationships with him, the way he views his role as maybe now the elder statesman of a team, a defense. Yeah. He takes it seriously. He is a consummate pro, and this is a nice reward for that.
Well, I tell that story about 2019 only to kind of circle it back to a couple weeks ago, and you heard me describe the vibe in the Cleveland locker room and how crushed those guys were. And Eddie actually asked for 90 seconds to gather himself as he was slumped back in his locker stall, and we gave it to him, and then he cut open a vein for 4 or 5 minutes and told us about the afternoon, told us about the things that went wrong, told us about the emotion and why guys were feeling like that in the locker room. And so it was telling, and it was a really significant moment in the course of the season. I will say this, Cole Kmet and Jaquan Brisker have been consistently reliable at talking after losses. And that's one thing that those of us in our profession truly respect and appreciate, is those guys that no matter how bad you get beat, the understanding of, I'm going to stand up and answer whatever questions come my way, and I'm going to handle this part of the job with grace and dignity. Those two guys deserve a lot of credit for that part of the job as well. And so, I guess that leads us into to some of the things we talked to Eddie Jackson about on Thursday. Again, I mentioned the fact that Jeff Dickerson's parents, George and Sandy, have been in attendance the last 2 years. It brings emotion into the room, David, that you're not quite prepared for, because I know for me personally, I still haven't fully processed the idea that Jeff is gone. You just expect to see him there one day and be like, oh, hey, JD, how have you been? And it's not happening. And Eddie's one of the guys that's been around long enough to have known Jeff. And so we'll start out with kind of the exchange of Eddie accepting his award on Thursday, and then a couple of the questions that went back and forth as he explained kind of his approach with media.
I'd like to thank everyone in here. Also Jeff, the times I met him, nice, humble guy. Always asks the right positive questions. So, us as players, we always thankful for that, as most of you guys in here do, but not everyone. To his family, just want to say thank you guys for being here. It means a lot. Like I said, the times I met your son, it was always a great conversation. Very humble, nice, respectful guy. And, you guys did a fine job of raising him. So I'm honored to, accept this award. After that, I guess, what questions, Tom?
You've obviously seen a lot over 7 seasons in this building. I'm curious, as a young player, kind of how you learned to handle this market, this spotlight, and just kind of learn how to be a resource to us as reporters.
Man, just from older guys, just seeing how they went by it. Khalil Mack, is one of my, staples in that when it comes to things like that, just how he handled everything just in a professional manner. And just the media, just try to help you guys make your job easier. As players, we understand you guys all have jobs to do. So if we can help that, and keep it in a respectable manner, we're here for it. So that's kind of how that went about.
Eddie, why do you take seriously the responsibility to be someone who talks when not every player of your caliber is willing to do that? What is the responsibility you feel within the locker room to be someone who's going to answer the tough questions?
I feel like it's needed, especially when you got the younger guys and guys in the locker room look at you as a leader. I feel like your response is held to a higher standard than someone else's. So I feel like it's always, meant for me to speak, whether it's me, Tremaine, or a guy like that. We can go out there after a tough loss, even when we don't want to speak, we still feel like, you have to say something. Like I said, everyone has a job to do, and it's for us to make you guys' job easier, answer those tough questions. And not just, tip my hats off, because a lot of teams, their media is kind of different than ours. Like, everyone here keeps it respectful. And I feel like that is huge for us, as players. Like, we really appreciate that. Because, guys can twist up stories and make what type of headlines. But you guys, you keep it straight on and respectful. But, it's on us, to stand up and hold ourselves accountable after a win or a loss. Just like in the meeting room, if you give up a play, it's for you to stand up and, admit to that mistake and go on and try to correct it.
David, I'm going to go ahead and screen grab that quote about the Chicago media and put it on Twitter, so the world that they need to know that the players are appreciative of how respectful and straightforward we are.
You do appreciate that. I mean, he understands the job sometimes can be twisted. He understands the role that we both play, and there's that's kind of unexpected praise or unexpected objectivity, I think, from a player who has been, he received his share of criticism over the years. And I think that's really interesting to see. Dan, though, when you hear him talk, and this will segue into our next comment from Eddie, I think when you hear that maturity level and that respect level, and I think that stability that his voice does provide, whether it's, into a microphone or maybe, in the secondary, settling people down, getting people lined up on the sidelines. We heard a lot from John Hoke. He's big on, having guys who have this emotional maturity. How does that factor in? How will that play a role in a guy who is a veteran, coming off a season that maybe he thinks has been good, but maybe he thinks could be better. He's going to have a high number next year salary-wise, $14 million. How does that all go into the equation when evaluating what Eddie Jackson's future holds?
There's no question. I thought Brad Biggs had some good insight in his 10 Thoughts piece coming out of the game over the weekend against the Cardinals about the uncertain future for Eddie Jackson. You mentioned it. His base salary for 2024 is $14 million plus. His cap hit number is north of $18 million. And so he's not a good enough player at this stage of his career to justify holding that amount of salary cap space there. And so Ryan Poles is going to have to make some business decisions. He's going to have to figure out how valuable is Eddie to this locker room. How much does his presence mean? We've talked a lot about the Tez factor and the Montez Sweat element to the defensive resurgence. Well, that coincided with Eddie Jackson also coming back from injury that he suffered earlier in the season. And so I think there are defensive coaches in that building who clearly believe that Montez Sweat was a catalyst of what's happened for this defense, who also believe that Eddie Jackson's communication on the back end and his presence back there has been stabilizing at the same time. And so you have to figure out what that's worth. Eddie has certainly made it clear that like, you know, he would love to stay here. He also understands the business, so we'll see where this goes. But I think Brad, in his piece, was interested in learning if the front office came to you and said, "Hey, we'd like to keep you here, but we're not going to keep you here at your current contract number." How would you respond to that? And Eddie has seemed receptive to that. I asked him on Thursday afternoon if he's done any reflecting on the idea that he could walk into Soldier Field on Sunday against the Falcons and walk out, never to put the Bears uniform on again inside Soldier Field in that home stadium. Here was what Eddie had to say about that.
Really, I know guys keep asking me that. It's like I'm living in the moment, man. Like I'm appreciating the guys and just being around like Tremaine, those guys, TJ, D-Walk, like all the new guys, the new face on the team, and just the relationship we built within a year, man. It's like it's crazy. So I haven't really thought about it. You know, Lord willing, I hope I'm here next year. But like I said, man, God always has a plan. So I feel like I always land on my feet. I hope it's here. You know, I know how it works in the business. I wish I can be here my whole entire career, but we know how this thing works. But it's just you got to live in a moment. You know, you got 2 more games guaranteed. Like I said last time, like I'm guaranteed 2 more games as a Chicago Bear. So I'm going to live in that moment. I'm going to appreciate every moment of it.
That's pretty good stuff. Eddie Jackson is 30 years old. Safeties play a long time in the National Football League. If this Bears defense is as special as they think it can be, I think that is in his favor. You probably don't want to replace somebody who has such an intangible role. I mean, you can look at Brisker. You can look at the other guys who make a lot of the bigger plays right now. Eddie Jackson did have, you know, interception back to the 1-yard line, and that was really cool. But it was, you know, he hasn't had the takeaways that he had earlier in his career. But I do think there's value in what he brings, and that'll be one of the biggest offseason storylines as far as the defense is concerned.
Right, and look, there's a lot that's going to go into this offseason. You know, I think we're about to turn the page on 2023, and we're going to look back kind of dizzied by all that happened and how eventful it was from, you know, New Year's Day to New Year's Eve for this team. And then we're going to look ahead to 2024 and go, it could be twice as eventful and twice as significant in 2024. And so this period of Bears history is really setting up to be something. We don't know what it's going to turn out to be, but we know it's going to be something. And so I think that all these little decisions add up to big decisions. And we spend so much of our attention on the quarterback and the head coach that you lose sight of some of these other little things that Ryan Poles and his staff are going to have to get their arms around as they put their entire puzzle together.
Before we look too far ahead, remember there's a game Sunday. Let's look at that with our numbers game and our predictions. Every Friday, ChicagoTribune.com. Dan Wiederer has a numbers package. Dan, what are some of the highlights this week?
We're going to start with the defense here, and I'm going to give you one that is probably going to open your eyes, and it's 80.7. It's the number of rushing yards per game that the Bears have allowed this season. A year ago, they were allowing 157.3 per game. That was second to last in the NFL. They are suddenly the NFL's best run defense. And not only are the NFL's best run defense in 2023, Brad Biggs has a terrific piece coming this weekend about how they could become quite possibly the best run defense in Bears history.
Oh, my gosh.
The current leader in that category is the 2008 team that held opponents to 80.0 rushing yards per game. The 2001 team was at 82.1, and the 1985 Chicago Bears allowed 82.4 rushing yards per game. It gives you a little bit of perspective because those three defenses that we're talking about, in 85, 01, and 18, are three of the best we've ever seen here. Obviously, one is by far the best we've ever seen. And this team, in terms of stopping the run, has elevated itself to a level that we would not have foreseen being even fathomable when the year started.
That's a good one. Wow. All right. I have a couple, but I want to get to yours first. What's the second one?
All right. The second one is 8. It's the pass defense rank of the Atlanta Falcons, who are allowing 197.5 yards per game through the air. They've been really good on third down, David, this year. Third in the league on third down, allowing 33.3% conversion rate, and really good in the red zone. Tops in the red zone as a defense overall. That's going to be a challenge for Luke Getsy, Justin Fields, and the rest of that offense. It's something to wrap your brain around as you're making your last-minute adjustments to your prediction.
I think what you're telling me is that this is unlikely to be the 13th time in 37 starts that Justin Fields surpasses 200 passing yards, which is one of the more remarkable stats in his 3 years in Chicago.
Could be difficult. My last number here for you is a little bit off the path, but it's 4. It's the number of finalists for the class of 2024 of the Pro Football Hall of Fame who were members of the Bears. Obviously, it starts with Devin Hester, who's in his third year as one of the 15 modern era finalists. He is joined on that list by Julius Peppers, who spent 4 of his seasons here with the Bears, obviously the bulk of his career in Carolina, and then 3 seasons after Chicago with the hated Green Bay Packers. And then Jared Allen, who played a season and 3 games with the Bears in 2014 and 2015. His time wasn't long here. I obviously go back with Jared to my 2 seasons in Minnesota, a great player there. But you add in senior finalist we talked about previously, Steve Mongo McMichael, who's almost certainly getting the green light to Canton this next year, and you have to figure out if he's going to be joined by any of those other 3 guys that I just mentioned.
I think Steve McMichael goes in. It's going to be a great day in Chicago when that is made official. I think Julius Peppers is likely to get in. He is, to me, a no-brainer on this list of 15. I hope Devin Hester gets in. I have lost a little bit of the confidence. It's probably not as strong as it was maybe a year ago. I was a little surprised he didn't get in. It's difficult for specials, even though he did change the game. I would vote for him, but I just don't know how much support he has in that room.
It's difficult in general, too. You got to remember that this list of 15 is loaded with guys, and then it's absolutely capped at 5. So only 5 of that 15 can get in. And so you're going to leave 10 really damn good football players out again. And that's what's happened to Devin the last 2 years.
And I think Jared Allen might be one of those 10 left out. He's got some numbers. He had some flair. He was probably one of the guys who was up for the Good Guy Award when he was in Chicago because he could be fun to stand around and listen to. But I don't think this is his time. But that news came out on Wednesday, and you just waited, and you feel a little bit of anxiety for Devin Hester, excitement for Mongo, and I think a sense of confidence when you talk about Julius Peppers. So that's a good list.
Yeah. All
right. My numbers are courtesy. I have 2 courtesy of our good friends at Pro Football Focus, which stood out to me perusing social media earlier today. I didn't realize that Kyler Gordon, I knew he had a very good game. I did not realize that according to their metrics that he had the he was the highest graded cornerback in week 16 or in the NFL with a 90.3 rating. That just underscores to me. I don't know what they're grading. I really don't know the metrics. I don't know what they're measuring, but you watched that game and you didn't need any analytics to tell you that this guy was flashing. And this was one of those games that Kyler Gordon's going to jump off the screen when you watch the tape. And he's had, after starting slow because of the injury that he had to miss the time, he's really had a pretty solid season, Dan.
Well, you've heard me sing his praises more than once, and just the presence that he brings and the way he plays, the physicality at his size to be aggressive and attacking in that nickel role has been fun to watch, and when you see some of the plays he makes at his size and with the tenacity that he plays with, you understand why the Bears coaching staff feels so strongly about his career ascent.
And the other number, courtesy of PFF, is 93, and that's the percentage chance the Bears have of having the number 1 overall pick. The Panthers play the Jaguars, then they finish with the Bucks. It'd be inconceivable to me right now, sitting here, to think that they're going to win both those games. And if they lose only one, the Bears have the number 1 overall pick, which makes all of the other conversations necessary. If they didn't have that kind of certainty with the number 1 overall pick, some of this debate with Justin Fields about the quarterback moving forward would make a little more sense to me. It really doesn't, only because of the likelihood, the 93% chance that they will have the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, I mean, that's a strong likelihood. The last I checked, I was really happy to bring home tests that had 93% on the top of them when I was in school. And so that tells me that it's pretty good, right? Like that they're going to have the number
Wow.
one pick. And we'll
Wow.
see.
You went to Illinois. Right?
Wow. Actually, in honor of our buddy Jeff Dickerson, I'm wearing the Illini.
Oh, that's great. That's
Illini
great.
golf shirt
Oh, I can't
today.
believe I dissed Illinois. Oh,
Yeah,
JD would respect that.
you can't do that.
ILLOMG.
I graduated with high honors from Illinois, Mr. Laugh It Up over there. So no.
with honors and high or high honors. Okay. So, all right. Those are our numbers this week. Let's get to our predictions and bring in Adam Studzinski, who my sense is that Studs has had a good week, riding high in the momentum of last week's victory, his successful prediction. Studs, what say you, Bears-Falcons Sunday on the lakefront?
Actually, what's funny, because of the holiday, I hadn't even thought about predicting this game until we started recording this pod, and I remembered, I got to send Cody Westerland my prediction for the Score website. So I'm not even sure if it's going to get on there or not. But anyway, I do want to say real quick on the Hall of Fame guys you mentioned. I think I can't imagine, if you're a Hall of Fame voter, not checking yes on Julius Peppers. Like, what else do you need from watching that guy play? Right. Like, I think when it first came out that he was going to be on the ballot this year, we were talking about it on the Bernstein Home Show, and Dan Bernstein just goes, that would be a yes. And we're going to move on from that.
Well, Studs, I'm just going to point this out again, because this is one of those things that gets kind of clouded over in the process every single year. Only 5 guys of those 15 get to the yes or no vote every year. So there may be 99% of the room that believes Julius Peppers is a yes, but at the same time, if there's 5 other guys that get passed along to that yes or no vote first, then you're left waiting. It's a silly process, in my opinion, because it just kind of delays the inevitable and puts a lot of these legends of the game through a lot of anxiety and stress, when quite possibly everyone in that room agrees with you that it's just a yes, and they're onward. I think it's very similar with Devin. I think there's a little pushback on him because he's a specialist, but most people I've talked to think that it's a matter of when, not if, with him. And so you're left to play that cruel waiting game.
Right. And yeah, I did also want to say on Devin, like, I understand there's a lot of other good players, but it's enough is enough. Like, he should have been in 2 years ago. So, and I know we're a little biased having watched him basically his entire career here with the Bears, but like, come on. I don't like, you listen to the way the coaches that were in the league back then talk about him
and the players.
So
it's universal.
I digress. So New Year's Eve, Bears-Falcons. I think these two teams are actually pretty similar in talent across the board, but the Falcons quarterbacks just stink out loud. And Arthur Smith tends to, like every other game, forget that he has 3 to 4 really good playmakers on his offense, and Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts and Drake London, and even their backup running back is pretty damn good. So I think that when you consider the quarterback play and the fact that Arthur Smith just forgets about these guys every other week, that Bears are going to force a couple turnovers, and Justin Fields in the offense. Falcons defense is good, but Justin Fields in the offense feeds off those turnovers, and they get the win 23-19, and we all have a happy new year.
Wow, pop the corks, 23-19. All right, interesting.
So I've got a weird feeling about this game. First and foremost, David, I wanted to let you know that I put in an advanced request for them to have more shrimp pregame at the New Year's Eve celebration at Soldier Field. I wanted you to know that was at least the request is in. I do have a funny feeling about this game, and I'm a little bit worried about the Bears' offensive injuries and their availability, particularly for Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney, which we'll get into in a little bit. I can't get past the fact that they're playing Taylor Heineke, and I just don't know that there's enough there for this Bears team with a surge of confidence and a surge of momentum to slip on the banana peel here. I think there's some danger here. We talked about the Falcons defense and their ability to make this a long, tough day for the Bears, but this is a game that you have to win if you want to firmly establish yourself as a middle tier team climbing to the upper tier team. And so I'm giving Justin Fields a late game winning drive, and I'm giving the Bears a 23-20 win.
Wow, I think that's an interesting way to frame it. And if that happens, good for Justin Fields. I don't think it's going to come down to that. I think that you have in Taylor Heineke the kind of quarterback who I have a lot of respect for. And I liked what Montez Sweat had to say about him as a teammate in Washington, because I think, that's what you want if you're a quarterback. You want to impress people on the other side of the line of scrimmage. But this is the kind of quarterback that this defense takes advantage of. I think it could be a takeaway fest. I think the Bears have a lot of odd momentum for a team that's 6-9. There's a lot of belief there. They know that they can win their 5th straight game at Soldier Field. My sense is internally in the building, they're stressing that. They want to cling to that because they want to cling to something. The season hasn't gone exactly the way they wanted, but you finish the season with that many consecutive victories at home, you start to forge an identity. And I think this season will be determined. Obviously it was probably dictated by what happened in September, but I think they finished strong, and that continues Sunday, 31-19 Bears.
3 for 3.
Wow.
3 for 3. All right. Happy New Year indeed. Let's get to another, before we get to the 2-minute drill, I want to, another segment beginning or addressing the Justin Fields situation. Dan, I wanted to see what you thought about 2 things about Justin Fields. We talked about this earlier in the week, but this could be his last game in a Bears uniform at Soldier Field. I think that he could be playing against a team that we'll hear on Sunday. It could be his future employer. It would make sense for the Falcons to be in the quarterback trade market. I'm very curious if you saw any parallels between, I'm not going to ask the Lamar Jackson, comp. I don't think that's on the field. The Denver Broncos did something extraordinary in terms of starting Jarrett Stidham over Russell Wilson and making a business decision for a team that, frankly, you could make the argument is in the hunt in the AFC playoff picture. You got Russell Wilson, who's a top 10 quarterback statistically in the league this year, whether he can still cook the way he used to or not. You had a business decision making and dictating a football decision. It happens every year and every week in the National Football League. But could the Bears be in that situation before the Packers game, regardless of what happens this week, if they clinch the number 1 overall pick by the virtue of the Panthers losing? Would you think that Ryan Poles will sit Justin Fields because you don't want to risk injury to somebody that you might end up trading?
So the Russell Wilson part of this conversation is about as high profile of a business decision as I've ever seen made. It's just kind of dizzying to think of what they're doing and why they're doing it and how it's kind of playing out publicly. It's very odd. And it's understandable, but it's odd, right? In a lot of different ways. And so you figure that out as you circle it back to the Bears. I don't see the Bears going down that path. I think that they have tried to remain fair in their evaluation of Justin Fields, and remaining fair to their quarterback, I think, requires pushing him to the end of the season and giving him all 18 weeks and it's, whatever, it'll be 13 out of 17 starts, 12 out of 17 that he'll make. You afford him that opportunity. Now, I think Justin has missed the season finale in each of his first 2 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. He had COVID in 2021, and then last year didn't get to participate in the Nathan Peterman Tim Boyle Bowl that we saw at Soldier Field. And so if Justin were to miss the game, I think maybe it would be because of injury that he suffered that might be a little bit worse in week 18 than everyone was expecting when they left the stadium in week 17, if you catch my drift. But I don't think there's going to be a public decision to say, hey, his future here is done. We're declaring it done publicly, and so we're going to sit him to protect that asset, because then you've just firmly declared that on January 2nd, 3rd, whatever it would be. And I think you'd have a whole hornet's nest to try to keep under control.
I understand that. You don't want a hornet's nest. You don't want to maybe tip your hand unless you think it's fairly obvious to everyone on the outside anyway. And I do wonder if you have a quarterback who does expose himself to the kind of hits that a running quarterback does. I want to wait until Monday to see how I feel about this. I'm not going to say absolutely under no circumstances would I play Justin Fields against the Packers. I do think that it's a conversation I would have if you were in that situation when you come to work on Monday. So I look forward to that conversation if the Bears are in that position, and I think they might be. I think they might be, because Jacksonville, even though without Trevor Lawrence, it's still a game they have to win. The Panthers they kind of stink. So I think the Bears, regardless of Sunday's outcome, could be in a position on Monday where they know they have the number 1 overall pick in April's draft, and they know they are likely to trade Justin Fields. And is that reality going to make you more inclined to protect your asset and preserve his health rather than expose him to the risk of injury, you could make a business decision based on that premise. I don't know yet how I feel about it until it's a reality.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a whirlwind. Like, we're in the middle of a whirlwind, and the whirlwind's not going to stop until May 3rd, when the draft is over and we firmly have answers to all the questions we have. And so I think you'd probably agree that this whirlwind gets pretty exhausting at times, and there's a lot of hypotheticals to consider across the board on a lot of different topics. It's just getting started. And so for those who follow the Bears closely and intensely, just make sure you got enough stamina to get to May 3rd, because we're not even close to done with all the twists and turns in what is going to be a crazy offseason.
We're close to done with this podcast, but let's finish it out with our 2-minute drill.
The 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill.
Luke Getzey, speaking of the future, Dan, asked about Justin Fields and whether or not he molded the offense well around the quarterback. You were there. You asked a question. How would you set up his answer?
Yeah, I just asked him to kind of assess how this season has gone in terms of making progress with the offense and molding it around Justin Fields' skill set. And here was how he replied.
It's a pretty intense question. I think that's something that you do after the season, that you reflect on something like that. I think when you're in the thick of it, you're just trying to do everything you can to find the best way to get the game plan together to go win the game. So that's I think there's been a lot of really cool progress throughout the offense, and I think Justin's been a part of that too, though, as you just on a general statement reflecting on that stuff.
Not a wholly satisfying answer there, David.
No, it wasn't.
I'm going to let you in behind the curtain on this. We walk out in the hallway afterwards, and I'm talking to my colleague, Colleen Kane, and she goes, "Pretty intense question." Yeah, Luke, these are pretty intense times right now. Normally mild-mannered Colleen Kane was a little bit rattled by Luke's dismissive nature on a pretty fair and straightforward question there.
I love that. I love that image of Colleen kind of going like that, because we both know she is relatively mild-mannered. She does a terrific job. Friend of both of ours.
She has a story coming out this weekend, Saturday morning on ChicagoTribune.com in your Sunday paper, about the possibility of this being Justin Fields' last game as a Chicago Bear. She was able to get some time one-on-one with Justin, and so that's a must-read when the weekend arrives.
That's great.
And really, the thread of that story, David, is this stuff happens fast. It felt like we were just at draft night, and now we're talking about this being the possibility of his last home game at Soldier Field. It's hard to believe how quick this league spins.
Getzey's answer there. Matt Eberflus going on the flagship earlier in the week and not really able to say if Justin Fields will be the starter in 2024. I think a lot of people are starting to connect the dots. You don't have to be, a sleuth to necessarily see what's going on here. But I look forward to seeing how she puts it all in perspective. She's done a terrific job. And I do like the image of her kind of losing it there.
I laughed exactly how you laughed on this podcast. I lost it for a couple seconds.
All right. So in terms of health, where are we with Cole Kmet? How about Darnell Mooney? And if they both are out, are they going to triple cover DJ Moore?
So Cole was out at practice, not participating in practice. So standing on the sidelines during the portion that was open to the media on Thursday. I think the Bears are hopeful that he can get himself back in a spot. I know Cole takes a lot of pride in not missing time. But that's a touch and go situation, especially for a 6-9 team. You're not going to do anything reckless for a New Year's Eve game that doesn't have a whole lot of big picture meaning to it. Interesting to keep an eye on. Darnell Mooney came back to the building after the game against the Cardinals and self-reported concussion-like symptoms. He's still in that protocol, and so it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. Again, those are two big pieces to this passing offense. When you're in the midway at Hallis Hall and you're talking to the receivers coach, Tyke Tolbert, about the potential role that Colin Johnson could play as a wide receiver in Week 17, you understand that they're playing some reshuffling games right now, and Velus Jones and Tyler Scott would certainly be part of that as well.
Another thing, there was a time when Atlanta was essentially Chicago South with all the ex-Bears connections. Yeah. Right now, it seems like Ryan Pace is in the front office, still with the Falcons. Any other Bears connections to keep an eye on Sunday?
I haven't looked at that closely. I know a year ago that was like a third of their roster were guys that had played for the Bears, and I think we did didn't we do a whole segment on that?
I think we did
last year.
We did.
I think we drafted all the former Bears that were on the Falcons. We'll see there. I'm not sure if Ryan Pace will be returning to Soldier Field this weekend as part of the traveling party with the Falcons. That'd be interesting if he's back in the building on New Year's Eve. And yeah, it's an interesting game, and the familiarity I think is relevant to some extent. DJ Moore talked on Thursday about obviously his time in the NFC South and understanding how feisty that defensive backfield can be for receivers. He's got the understanding that he's had success against them. We'll see which way it goes on Sunday afternoon.
John Hoke, former Atlanta's Falcons assistant coach, came from Atlanta to the Bears. He was on the staff for the Falcons for a couple of years under Arthur Smith, and he has made an impact in this Bears secondary this year. I know that they have played well. I know you have to give them credit, but I do think John Hoke's had a pretty stabilizing impact.
Without question. And this is one of those things, David, where when you're able to pair a terrific teacher with a bunch of young, hungry, eager to learn defensive backs, you get results, and you've seen results from Jalen Johnson. You've seen results from Tyreek Stevenson. You've seen results from Terrell Smith. It's a good group back there, and they're moving. And Kyler Gordon, as we talked about earlier, there's a lot to like about the direction that unit's heading. That's where this coaching decision becomes a little bigger, I think, in some regards, because you're just trying to figure out the amount of disruption you're willing to take on if you decide to fire the head coach and move in a new direction, because it does mean starting anew with every single position group and every single player that you're trying to develop.
I'm going to help you out with angles this week if you need something to write for Sunday. I think that I now have unearthed this little nugget. The Falcons earlier this week, before the Christmas holiday, I believe, signed Patrick O'Donnell to the practice squad. So Patty O might still be on the Falcons payroll, on the Falcons roster. He knows what it's like to kick in Soldier Field in late December. Maybe he makes the trip. I don't know.
I'm scanning through their roster right now as we talk. I see Scotty Miller, who doesn't have a Bears connection, but I think he's from Barrington. Correct?
He's local. He used to be Brady's guy. Mistaken. Yeah.
You've got Cordero Patterson, former Bear. That's an obvious one. And he returned a punt or a return to kickoff against the Bears for a touchdown last year. Michael Pruitt was here for a little bit as a tight end. That might be it. Just that's a much shorter list than we're used to seeing. And
punters are important, and because I think that was the most. You were stumped this week. I think when your appearance on the Wednesday Mully and Haugh show was punctuated by you being asked by Mully what he thinks about the Bears punter. Could they get better there?
Mully seemed like that was a top ticket item for they got to get that solved.
He's very concerned about the punter. And we're going to get to the bottom of that. Then we're going to do. I think we should do like an hour next week on if Trenton Gill has a bad game. I think we'll spend an hour on Tuesday morning about what to do about the punter.
Well, on Friday morning, I'm sitting in for you, so I can.
That's right. You better get to bed.
I know I do need to get to bed, but maybe I get the airwaves.
Well, I think we covered it all. Anything else to add?
I don't think so. I'll see you by the shrimp cocktail on Sunday afternoon.
I can't wait. It's a little bit early for that, but hey, we dip it in a little bit of sauce and you can pretend like it's 5 o'clock somewhere. All right. For Adam Szynski, for Dan Wiederer, I am David Haugh. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast. You can watch us on the 670 Score YouTube page and listen to us on the free Odyssey app. Happy New Year, Bears fans.
Great talk. See you out there.